Dear guests, I'd like to welcome you to this event tonight. As you were entering this auditorium, you might have seen pictures outside taken by the Israeli photographer Ziv Koren. He tried to capture what has happened on October 7th, on this horrific day. Today, we want to speak exactly about that, about the brutality of the Hamas terrorists, and especially about what they did to girls and women of all ages. They purposely used sexual violence against women in order to humiliate them and to humiliate the whole Jewish nation. As we speak about these acts of violence, there are still plenty of people who are denying this terror and refuse to condemn it. Some of them even prominent feminists who call the Hamas-Massaker and the brutal sexual violence of the Hamas terrorists an uprising and an act of resistance. We, as the WerteInitiative, as a Jewish organization in Germany, we are raising our voices loud and clear on this matter, because we know that the Jewish future and a Jewish future is only possible in a society where not only democratic values are being accepted, but people also live by them. And this society needs to be one that condemns violence and this horror. But since trivialization of terror is being accepted and tolerated, we feel obliged to speak up and to object. Since it's our lives and the future of our democratic society that is on the line here. Together with the American Jewish Committee, the Axel Springer Freedom Foundation, and the Frauen, Freiheit initiative, we want to make sure that the voices of Israeli women are being heard. And we want, at least to try, to give the victims of the Hamas massacre of October 7th back their dignity and the respect that they deserve. Our first guest tonight will be Chen Malka, who is a survivor of the Nova Music Festival. She will be sharing her story with us tonight. The journalist Rixa Fürsen is going to lead us through the conversation. We are very grateful to have great experts here tonight, who our host Rixa Fürsen will introduce to you later in the second panel. From the whole team of WerteInitiative and our dear partners, the Axel Springer Freedom Foundation, American Jewish Committee, and Frauen für Freiheit initiative, I am wishing you an insightful evening. Feel free to reach out to us and to get in touch with us after the event.
Thank you, Anna, for introducing us. Hi, I'm Rixa, and I'm very happy to guide you through this evening. And I also want to thank all of you for coming here tonight. This is not a usual Thursday night activity. This is not a pleasant event to come together, but is very important and very crucial that we talk about what has happened on October 7th, which is exactly 5 months ago today. And I'm very glad to welcome Chen Malka here on stage. We met earlier at the stage to do an interview, and Chen has done many interviews since then. And I'm very happy for you to share your story here today, to talk about what has happened to you exactly 5 months ago, what was supposed to be a very happy memory, unforgettable memory, and turned out to be an unforgettable memory in the worst possible way anyone could imagine. So can you share with us? I think it's very important that we don't forget what has happened on October 7th in Israel, and especially on the Nova Festival.
Of course. First of all, I would like to thank you all for being here and trying to support us, because it's very important for my whole country and for me personally as a survivor, and speaking in the name of all the survivors, that the world will know about this. And I would like to apologize in advance if I kind of stutter in the middle while I speak about it. It's just a very stressful memory and in a stressful kind of situation, so I'm just mentioning that. The Nova Festival was supposed to be a really big party for my friends and I. We were all expecting for it for a very long time, and you know, it was just supposed to be like a festival like Ultra, like Coachella, all these big festivals in the world. We arrived there at 2, my boyfriend and I, and we met up with our friends. Everything was just beautiful, and we went to dance for a few hours, and then at around 6 a.m. We started seeing drones in the sky. And at the beginning, we thought those were drones from the production, that they were filming us, so we were all like waving at them. And apparently those were drones from the Hamas that were filming and scanning the area. And a few minutes after that, we started seeing sparks in the sky, and we thought those were fireworks, and they ended up being missiles. And a few seconds after we noticed them, we got an alert from the DJs. They turned off the music, and the production got on stage and told us that we're being shot at, and everybody to lay down on the ground. And then we started panicking because we were in open field, and we could have been shot at with the missiles. Thankfully, we had the Iron Dome that protected us. And a few minutes after we were just laying down there on the ground, they told us to go head home and leave to our cars. We all went to our tents and places and met up with our friends after we were at the stages. And we were like debating whether we should leave or not. Some people wanted to wait it out. Some people wanted to wait for the traffic to end. Thankfully, my boyfriend that is sitting right here, he had a strong intuition, and he said that we should leave the area immediately. So we headed towards the car. While we were heading towards the car, we saw people. I have a kind of hard time speaking about this part. We saw people that were falling around on the ground and being hurt. And we managed to get to the car. There was traffic, so we overcame the traffic and we drove on the fields, and then we got on road 232. When we turned right, we saw a vehicle that was just standing on the sides of the road, and the vehicle was apparently a terrorist vehicle, and thankfully, the moment that we passed it, they weren't armed, so they were relocating, and they were switching places from the driver and the back seats. But we saw a few terrorists that stood right in front of us, and they were wearing IDF uniforms, but black pants, so it was kind of confusing. We passed that car, and then we saw weird cars scattered in the middle of the road, and a few meters after that, a few more cars that seemed like they were blocking the road. So we had a fast decision, and we just ended up turning back, and we ended up doing that for like about 5 times back and forth. And then we passed by the outside of Kibbutz Be'eri, and when we passed that area, we saw a bomb shelter, and we drove really slowly next to that bomb shelter, and we were kind of contemplating whether we should leave the car and enter the bomb shelter, because all this was happening while there's still missiles in the sky and red alert. And we saw a weird situation, like a hostage being held at the entrance of the bomb shelter, and an officer aiming his gun towards the entrance. Thankfully, the officer kind of signalized to my boyfriend to continue driving. So that's what we did. And apparently a few seconds after that, they threw grenades right inside that bomb shelter. They took down the officer, and they just sprue missiles on, sorry, not missiles. They sprue gunshots inside the bomb shelter and on all of the people that came to the party. There were only around 10 to 12 survivors, and there were 40 people from the party inside the bomb shelter. After that, we continued driving, and before we entered Kibbutz Be'eri, I was in the car just praying and putting my head down. And I don't really remember this too much. It's kind of blurry in my memory, but I heard a crash and like a strong a boom kind of sound. And apparently those were two terrorists that were in the middle of the road and aiming at us. And thankfully my boyfriend just kind of flew them away with the car because he was driving so fast just to get away from the area. And then we got to the entrance of Kibbutz Saad, and we saw stranded cars on the outside of the kibbutz, and we were like, should we overpass it or should we stay? And there was a person standing in between the stranded cars, and he kind of signalized that we would stop our car. And once we stopped, he opened our window. He told us to open the window, and he said, leave the road immediately, leave your car. The whole road is full of terrorists. And a few meters right after us was the entrance of Kibbutz Kfar Aza. Just a few meters. We could literally see it right in front of our face. If we would have continued driving, we would probably been sprayed at over there again. And also I would like to mention that before they were also shooting at us on the way, but somehow miraculously our car got saved. Didn't get hurt, but we saw people in their cars wounded and injured and being shot at, and their cars were just stuck on the road because they've been shot.
So you survived through pure luck that has nothing
exactly
compared to what has happened to others. Like nothing is not the right word in this situation, but you survived through luck. Like with you on the festival, there were 3,000 people celebrating life, celebrating peace, and more than 360 of them got killed and murdered by Hamas. Some of them are still taken hostage in Gaza today. You were there not only with your boyfriend, but also with friends and friends of friends. So do you know when you got evacuated in the kibbutz Saad for 10 hours in uncertain conditions, where were your friends? What did you know about your friends to that time?
A lot of them were hiding in bushes. My cousin was also there with his friends, and he ran for 20 kilometers in open fields while he was being shot at from behind. He heard the whistle of the gunshots in his ear passing by, and every time he turned around, he just saw people falling down, like the Holocaust. I mean, it's so hard for me to say it, but it's just so compared to the Holocaust. So many situations that are similar to what happened in World War II. We also have friends that hid behind tanks while they were witnessing a gun war between IDF soldiers and the terrorists. They saw soldiers being killed. We saw people being wounded on the way and in the kibbutz. A lot of people that ran from Kfar Aza and from the party and managed to get to Kibbutz Saad. And we've just seen so many graphic images. And, I ask myself, were I'm 25. I was actually 24 at the party, and so many young people that were there just to celebrate life. Why do we have to see this? Why did we have to go through something like this? It's such a, like, it's the last place on earth that you would expect to have a terror attack. And it could have happened in any other festival in the world. I mean, it's not something unusual. So it's very hard for me to accept this kind of reality.
I truly believe that, and I thank you very much for sharing that. We're here today not only to talk about the people that have been killed and murdered, but to talk about what has happened also, sexual violence being misused, especially against Israeli women. On the festival, there were a lot of party people, young people, people that got ready to go to a nice event, to have fun and party, and then a lot of Hamas terrorists attacked them, took hostages into Gaza, and also the Nova Festival is known to be one of the worst places concerning the sexual violence. If you like to share what you know, what you've seen.
Sure.
Earlier you told me, which I found very touching in our interview, you're here to speak for the people that are not able to speak what has happened to them because it's too traumatizing, that what they have been through.
Exactly. I remember being a woman at this event was especially terrifying because the only thing that I could think of while we were starting to digest and understand what's happening was, what if they catch me? And I could have easily been one of those girls. And I remember looking at all of the girls when we got to the festival, and all of them were just dressed so beautifully in like sparkly clothes and, you know, festival kind of clothes. And I mean, I don't know what kind of provocation would it cause for the terrorists when they saw them dressed in this kind of way. And I just remember being terrified that if I will get caught, what type of horrors would they do to me. And sadly, I heard of things from people that I know, friends of mine, that were eyewitnesses, and friends of mine that went through sexual violence situations. There are stories, I mean, not stories, there are events, sorry, of situations where there were a group of women caught by the terrorists from the party, and they were raped one after the other, and while they were being raped, they were being abused, and the terrorists cut off their sexual organs and just played soccer with their sexual organs, their breasts. And they did that in front of their faces while they're still doing their acts. And they killed them, and they raped their bodies after they killed them. So they didn't even stop after. They just continued abusing their bodies over and over again. And I know that, you know, they took couples and they raped the woman right in front of her boyfriend, and they made the boyfriend look at it, and then they cut the men's genitals and they played with the women. It's very hard for me to speak of it, but it's just important that the world will know about this because it happened.
I guess that everybody in this room has heard, or maybe even few people have seen the videos that have been published. And for me, it's very painful when you tell me that story, and I cannot imagine what it must feel for you. And you telling me this, like just now when we're standing in front of the pictures that were here in the gallery outside, just looking at the images and just shaking your heads, because it's unbelievable what happened, and there is this proof. It did happen, it's reality, and I think it's super important that we talk about this, that we share what has been happened, that we are not silent.
Yes.
And I would like, my final question to you would be, what is there to be done? Like, how can we help the people to not overcome the trauma, but maybe to do just a little bit to help them heal or help them live with that? You are traumatized, your boyfriend is traumatized, and all the women and people that have been tortured, sexually harassed, abused, violated. What can the world do to make them heal?
First of all, I think that accepting that this really happened with the great unbelievableness of this situation, and being a person that was there, and we had phone calls from our friends telling us they're hiding inside bushes and they're hearing screams of girls yelling and shouting for their lives. We heard everything, we were there, and I could have easily been in that situation. I want, for me at least personally, I think it's just important that the world will first of all believe this, not deny it, and most importantly, not legitimize this type of behavior. Because, I ask myself, why do we even have, asylums and prisons if people legitimize this type of behavior? What's the reason to have a prison or people to, or places to cage up people that behave like this? Legitimizing this means you're letting this type of behavior continue to happen. So I just think that the world should really understand what happened there, and that it should stop and try to prevent it as much as possible. Because for me now, I want to go out and feel free, at a party or at any place in the world. And this is the message of the Nova community too, because we became a community after this event.
So maybe
our slogan,
you cannot see it, but Ren is wearing a shirt from the Nova Festival and also a necklace that has been released after October 7th.
Yes, and the message is we will dance again. The message is to spread love and peace, and to not let them win, not let the evil side win. Spread light, and may the good side win too. So just the importance of this to me is to not let this happen again, and not legitimize this behavior, so we can feel safe going to a party now or going out on the streets to just share love with people.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this, Ren. I'm very glad that you did this trip or do this trip to Germany to share your story with the media, with us here tonight. And it gives me hope that you have hope to dance again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So, as you can see, we will start our panel now, and I'm very much looking forward to introduce to you our panelists. So we have two panelists that also came from Israel here tonight. First one is Miki Reutmann. She's a lawyer. She's a human rights or female activist. She was part of the Supreme Court or worked for the Supreme Court in Israel. She's an international lawyer in the UK, in Israel, and also here in Germany. And I'm very much looking forward to talking to you, also seeing how to legalize or prosecute what has happened, the sexual crimes on October 7th. So, Niki Reutmann for everybody. Yeah. Then, also from Israel, there's Yael Shera. She is head of, now I have to look at my cards, of the Survivors of Sexual Violence Advocacy Group. So she is a specialist on health policy, and her organization now helps the victims of sexual violence of October 7th to get the right help, to connect them to the government, and she is working together with the women that they get the treatments and also the support they need by the government. I'm very happy that you're here tonight, Ms. Shera. Then also we have Rebecca Schönbach, who is from the foundation Frauen, Freiheit. She's an expert on feminism, on terrorism, also how in radical Islam women have been mistreated, and she has worked together with survivors of IS terror, and we can talk about how this is not only a byproduct of a war crime, how this is a political war weapon used against women and used against Israel. Welcome on the stage, Mrs. Schönbach. And finally, we have Professor Jan-Ilan Kislian, who's a psychotraumatologist who works together with a lot of people from transculture, traumas. He is working also together in this field for 30 years of study, conducting or working together with more than 1,400 women who have survived IS terror. So we can also talk with you tonight how people can heal, what has to be done to make people heal from these traumatic stages. And I'm very delighted to welcome all of you for here on stage tonight. Thank you. So we just heard a report of Ren, who is a survivor of the Nova Festival, who has friends, has seen the violence that has happened tonight on October 7th. Tonight we are facing the International Women's Day tomorrow. So this is a double special event that we are meeting here tonight. And Mrs. Shera, my first question is concerning to you. You're helping the people, the women that have victimized by Hamas sexually.
And men.
And men as well. Can you explain a bit about your work? How are you helping them at the moment?
I'm a survivor myself of sexual violence, and I started an organization to do with advocacy and policy. And it's an organization of survivors, both women and men. And we aim to better the treatment of survivors in Israel. I studied health management, and I specialize in sexual violence, forensic evidence and DNA. And so on the 7th of October, for the first time, I encountered widespread war crimes within my own country. It never occurred to me that I would need to work on such issues before. I only worked on policy in Israel to do with internal affairs and advised other countries in conflict situation, and this has brought this to our country in such a way that was very obviously we needed to address it immediately. So it happened on the 7th of October. By the 8th of October, I already started working with our government. I already knew everybody in the field, and we try to understand whether or not we have living survivors, and what do we do with people who survived such a traumatic event, and the bad news are that not many people survived, and that most of the people who were sexually assaulted and raped were executed.
There have been traumatic reports of women raped to death, or some of them that are still in Gaza, so they're like for 5 months, people are still
we have reports from people who came back from captivity, and my job is to make sure that the Israeli government provides everything it needs to provide, and if not, that is what we will fight for.
Mrs. Freudmann, how are you keeping up with the situation legally as a lawyer? Like, what is there to be done at the moment?
Well, I think the government is contemplating how to deal with this legally. Sorry? Yes, okay. So I think the government is currently contemplating on how to deal with this legally. We have an issue. There were about 3,000 people who committed a crime. How can you attribute a specific crime to a specific person when there is also evidentiary problems with establishing, just as an example, in the first 48 hours, the bodies were collected into one place, about 800 to 900 bodies. They didn't even have enough body bags, so they put bodies together. So there was contamination of evidence. So how do you know who raped whom and when and where? So all of these things that are normally evidentiary-based are not available for us right now. And the question is, how do you prosecute the people who have committed these atrocities when you're not in the normal proceedings? And as it seems now, we're going to be going to do something along the lines, and again, it's not decided yet, along the lines of what happened in the Eichmann trial, where you have a different set of rules. And we need to decide how we prosecute the individuals. So do we do it in groups? Do we decide which group to prosecute to which crime? Because some were just pillagers, some are rapists. How do we decide? And also we need to address the fact that they deserve a defense, whether we want to or not, that this is the legal system. So there are a lot of difficulties. And how we treat them, it's going to take a lot of creativity to deal with these problems.
Probably it will also take some more time at least until the whole process is ended.
It's going to take time, definitely. I think right now the priority is really to deal with the victims. We have many victims. We have first responders as victims that are traumatized. We have eyewitnesses who are traumatized. We have now actually been dealing with children who've seen the videos that Hamas released and are traumatized by those. So we have different victims that we need to treat and we need to help. So I think that's where the focus is currently. But yes, I do know that there are discussions in government on how to prosecute the people who committed the atrocities.
Professor Kisselian, you are working together with people that have been sexually victimized. How can you help them overcome these trauma or learn how to live with this trauma?
Yes, it's really, we have to go maybe more back first if you're talking about Israel and Jews, sure. So we have one effect or one important issue, which we call this transgeneration traumata, which means everyone in Israel or abroad. When we heard on 7th October, this genocide, I call this a genocide, is because it's systematically. And it's traumatized not only the people who were in Israel or witnessed or were survivors. It's a kind of secondary traumatization all over the world. So we can talk about a national traumatization in Israel. And with my colleague in Tel Aviv, we are talking about epigenetic, and we have some projects. And we expect that at least in Israel we will have, after post-conflict, after at least 20 to 30%, we will suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. This is general. So we have a collective trauma, which means all Israel and Jewish people are traumatized in a second way, in secondary traumatization. And of course, we have the individual traumatization. You mentioned a little bit, we need a kind of emergency in the first step of psychological care. But the second issue, we need experts who are psychotherapists and psychiatrists, expert in psychotherapy, how to treatment. There are many ways, and Israel is very well known. We have good experts, we have good psychiatrists and psychotherapists, but we need more support from international support, because they will not be able alone to do this work. We are talking about 2 to 3, 4 million people in general. And so there must be a new national and international support to do this. I don't use the word healing in post-traumatic stress disorder, but they will be able to cope with this trauma if they have a psychotherapy, social work support maybe, economic support and psychotherapy. But the most important, if you don't even have nothing, the solidarity of the people is very important. I know from my experiences when I'm working with the Yazidi survivors were in IS captivity. And you mentioned we take 1,100 women to Germany for medical treatment, and still I'm working there. And they don't have psychotherapists, they don't have psychiatrists, they don't have nothing. And they're living in refugee camps, about 300,000. And still there is a kind of hope and resilience that we have work on that. So psychotherapy is possible, it's a long-term issue, but the people need solidarity, they have the feeling they are not alone. And they will take time, and they will always remember, but through psychology we can help them.
Mrs. Schönbach, you also worked on this topic, focusing on similar patterns that have like a similar atrocity that has happened on October 7th. Can you explain a bit about your work? Like, is this a normal phenomena, not normal, but is this a known phenomena that we have seen on October 7th, or is this something that the world has never seen before?
Well, the phenomenon of rape as a weapon of war and as a weapon, also an instrument of terrorism, is known. But even experts like Professor Kizilhan, or experts examining the atrocities done by the Islamic State to Yazidi women and Kurdish women, told me they have never seen this kind of extent of atrocities, and the brutality is beyond words. So all of you probably heard some stories, but every time I read up on the next testimonies, there's something even more gruesome. And I think this kind of extent and the systematic approach, because it has been done in several locations with the same patterns, so it is a systematic sexualized violence directed against women, also against men, but to dehumanize and to humiliate the women directly, but those around them. This is the secondary traumatization, and it was intentional. And probably also intentional because it was prepared for about 2 years, as far as we know now, with the help of external forces like the regime in Iran, which also uses sexual violence against its own population, but also in the area where it's mingling in different sorts of, for example, Syrian prisons, also atrocities beyond words. And that is something I think we have never seen before. And the secondary effect is not only to know what happened, but also that it has been intentional, and it is used as a political tool to intimidate women all around the world. And I think that is one of the most important points Chen made, because it's not only recognizing that the violence happened, but also recognizing that it was intentional and that it is used systematically to control women. Control women in the Islamic world to stay at home, not to go out of bounds, but also to radicalize in a way young men here who watch these videos and learn that they can do to women whatever they want. And that kind of fear I heard from some of you in the room, Jewish women who fear that they're now becoming targets of the same kind of violence and react to it. So this is our work, to counter this kind of violence and to strategically counter it, because women's rights movement have always been about countering victim blaming. you had it coming because you were out at night alone, you were a miniskirt. No, it's not the women, it's not the miniskirt, it's the perpetrator who is responsible for the violence. So in this case, on October 7th, it's Hamas which is responsible for the violence. It's not but. Every time we have a but, every time we stay silent, we have a but. Yes, it has been done, and no, we don't agree with it, but we sort of allow that women do not have human rights anymore because there's a but. And this is what we counter. And this is also what concerns us, because our democracies, our freedom, one of the key elements is the equality of men and women. If we allow a but, there has been violence, there has been rape, torture, and executions, but then we say a but, these people do not have human rights. And we have to counter that to also save us.
I think that's a very good statement for a round of applause. So thank you. And we didn't meet, but we know that we were on the same event a couple of weeks ago in the Foreign Affairs Office here in Germany. And Sheryl Sandberg, former CEO of now Meta, had a very similar event that she hosted on the same topic. And she said something that I had to think about many times since then. There's never been so much proof on what has happened, and so little belief.
Definitely.
And there are people denying what has happened, even though Hamas posted these kind of videos, these proofs.
They took them. They took those videos. And I think the huge thing that is new here is that murder and executions and rape became a reality show. It has been in the making for years, and they have been planning it for years, and part of their game plan was to film it. They had body cameras. If they didn't intend to do anything worth filming, then why body cameras? And now the shocking thing for me, as a survivor of sexual violence, is to see them posting these videos of what they've committed and gaining popularity through it. People watching these videos and backing these people that have done these things to women and men that are civilians that did nothing to them. It was 6:30 in the morning. People were asleep in their bed. It was a holy day. Hamas knows what Shabbat is. It's not a secret that Israelis observe the holy day. And for people to say, but, I mean, for me, it's just, I can't believe the support they've gained through this attack. Can't believe it.
So, Mr. Kisian, you...
Yeah. Actually, the terrorism or the violation by Islamic radical organization is nothing new. So my second field is Arabic studies, and so I go through I'm not Muslim, but nevertheless, I go through all the Quran and Islamic history. If you look just in the last 30, 40 years, we have a lot of radical organizations started with Al-Qaeda, maybe in Afghanistan, everyone knows. Sakrawi came to Baghdad and beheaded the first people on media, on the television, and show all about the world. Then we had the IS, and the IS did the same like the fatwas in 80th centuries and 50th centuries. They'd say people who are not Muslims, you are allowed to take their own businesses, to take the women and rape them. This is allowed according to the Quran. And Hamas did the same. And this is a kind of new Islam ideology. It's not the Islam belief, it's an ideology. And this ideology allowed them to kill people. The difference between Daesh, because I did a lot of interviews with Daesh when they are arrested in Iraq and Syria. The difference between them now, Hamas killed babies. Daesh didn't that. Daesh has some regulations. You are allowed to take one 9 years girl, Yazidi girls, for example. They said with the age of 9 years you can rape them. This is their own regulations. And they have some regulation, but Hamas did it different. They did it by show, and they used the violation. And now the question is how people can do that. They are humans, like you, me, and they're concerned about maybe their parents, children, but in the same way, they are able to kill people. And in a different way, how it's possible to kill women, children, babies. Because they have an ideology that's called, it's a dehumanization of the human. They make human to the object. They are not human anymore. They take in the face of humanity. And I know from IS fighters, when I interviewed them, how you were able to behead people on the marketplaces of Raqqa. And he was even concerned not to do it in a perfect way, because the people could be laughing on him. He is not a professional. His concern was to do this, but he said to me, I have no empathy to all another people. I have more empathy and emotion to kill a chicken, but not a Yazidi or Christian people. This is the same with Hamas. They have no empathy to his enemy. This is a biological process to have empathy with another people, but if you have ideology, you can't stop your empathy to another group. And for them, the Jewish and Israeli people are not anymore human, and they can do everything with them what they want. And last one, as an expert, I can say you through my studies and another studies, they have any psychopathological disorders. They are not in any way psychological psychopaths, and they are very normal people, and they know very well what they've done.
Maybe to add to what he said is that when we speak to Hamas prisoners in Israel, they do say that they had religious orders to do that. So they were allowed under religion, under their ideology, as you've correctly said, to do it. So that's something that we've discovered through interviews with Hamas terrorists.
I would like to talk about the international community, or this reaction of the international community. So there has been a UN report released this week, 5 months after the massacre and the sexual violence taken by Hamas or conducted by Hamas, right in the week of the International Women's Day. That proves that there has been this kind of violence used at least in 3 places. Do you think this is the right reaction that comes to the right time? This is the right step in the right direction, or is it too little, too late? Mrs. Freudmann.
Well, it's 5 months after the fact, so it does have less impact than if it would have happened initially. The report is limited. However, the fact that there is a report and it does actually state that rape happened, that sexual assault happened, is a positive.
Do you feel there's enough support on that matter from the international community, Mrs. Scherer?
I actually met with the UN delegation when they were in Jerusalem. I've met with Pramila Patten from the UN. I have voiced concerns about what the report would say, and I had very frank answers from Pramila Patten and from the team. And they said to me that they need to be ironclad, they need to have methods that allows them to make these claims. So I was very pessimistic when I left the meeting with her. And the fact that I was pleasantly surprised by the report tells you how little I expected of them, to say the least. She's a very, very nice woman, very professional, but she chose to be honest with me. And she was right. She did receive a lot of backlash and claims that she went too far. And for us, she didn't go far enough. They didn't bring a big team to Israel. They were very limited in their time that they spent. They had no time for further interviews, further investigations. So from my point of view, it was too little, too late. They were doing it in a rushed manner and couldn't get to the bottom of things.
Why do you think that is?
They didn't see the need to do it earlier. Only pressure from the Israeli government and international Jewish community made the difference here. I don't think they intended to do it at all.
So we live in the 21st century. There is a lot of feminism uprising, like Believe the Woman, Believe Israeli Woman. The WerteInitiative, I think, also started this campaign, or with a lot of people did. But why is it so hard for the world community to believe Israeli women? Mrs. Schönbach, maybe you have an explanation for that.
I don't think it's hard for them to believe that the sexual violence happened, and most of them sort of acknowledged after at least a few days, sometimes a few weeks, that there was sexual violence. Some of them 5 months afterwards needed a lot of evidence to finally say, yes, we have the evidence despite the videos. But the reason is plain and simple. Most of the women's rights movements diverted from the fact that we talk about human rights for women, basically, and think about discrimination against women more in categories of groups. So either you're black and discriminated against because you're black and a black woman, or other sort of categories. And some of the more far left spectrum of these women's movements also have the idea that once something is achieved, which was called, for example, socialism and so on, an ideal state, that all these discrimination would go away. The discrimination against women, the discrimination against blacks, and it would all be good. And that kind of goal was always against capitalism. And that sort of diverted into, and this is an anti-Semitic stereotype, saying it's not anymore capitalism, it's Israel. And of course, it's due to anti-Semitism, yeah? So the enemy is Israel, being the powerful, being the ones controlling the finance and so on. So it's an anti-Semitic stereotype. And I think that has to do with the refusal to acknowledge that Israelis can be victims, because they're not weak. They're not seen in these kind of categories as kind of discriminated against, because the stereotype is they're wealthy, they're kind of powerful, the military has way more power than any other military, but this kind of thinking and categories instead of individual human rights then made it impossible to jump out of the category and say, in this situation, in this individual situation, women were the victims. So it has to do with those thinking and categories, but also, and we have to address it, with anti-Semitism. The refusal to acknowledge that it was addressed specifically against Jewish women, and that Israel was standing for Jewish women, and that purposefully dehumanized and humiliated Jewish women. So to acknowledge that there is a connection, I think was one of the biggest obstacles for this kind of women's movements to voice it and to overcome their own concepts and to acknowledge that inherently their thinking is anti-Semitic.
Maybe just to add to something that was said here, my greatest shock was not women's organizations. It was not the feminist groups.
What was your greatest shock then?
It was UNICEF. The fact that children were killed and nobody said a word. You can argue about everything, but children. What can you argue about children being killed? What can justify children being killed? How come UNICEF till today haven't said a word about what happened on the 7th of October? That's what shocked me. Their motto is every child, everywhere, except in Israel.
So I just remember this horrible videos that were around all over the internet of little children and babies put in cages
That is actually from Syria. That is actually fake news, and it's taken from Syria.
Really?
Yes. The children in cages is a picture taken from Syria. But children were murdered. Children were decapitated. And it happened, and we have the evidence to show it. There were videos taken, so they were walking around with heads of children. There were these things happening. We have also look at another international organization like the Red Cross. The Red Cross is not visited with the hostages. Nobody says a word. That's the problems we're encountering. We did not expect that. We did not expect that the whole international community sort of takes a step back when it comes to Israel and Israelis.
How are you addressing this problem?
We talk a lot. We go around a lot of roundtables. We speak to many governments. The German government has been very supportive in helping. So was the French government. The European Union was very supportive. So we do have friends. Canadian government. I can quote a few. However, the international bodies. Maybe because we've ignored anti-Semitism that was in the international bodies. Maybe that's the reason. The fact that the UN constantly talks about Israel and constantly issues resolutions against Israel and not against other countries. Maybe we've taken it too lightly. Maybe we should have acted as well sooner in that, and then maybe the international community would be more pro-Israel. I don't know.
And have you, I guess obviously you did, but have you tried to reach out to UNICEF or the Red Cross? And what kind of answer did you get from them, if so?
Personally, no. So I don't know. But I do know that people were protesting against the Red Cross, in front of the Red Cross. I know that several approaches were made to the Red Cross in trying to get them more involved, aside from playing drivers. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. All they're talking about right now is, let's have a ceasefire. How can you have a ceasefire when you have 134 hostages held that are never visited by the Red Cross? How can you ask for something when you give nothing in return?
So, Mr. Kislian, maybe can you help elaborating how this kind of psychological ideology or logic is implanted? Why do people have a hard time believing Israeli people, like showing empathy with children being murdered, women being raped, also men?
Maybe I agree with all you three regarding anti-Semitism, and this is a big issue. So, and it's a political issue at the same time, of course. But one day before the 8th March of the International Women's Day, maybe we should also arise about the human rights of women in general. So, if a woman is raped, the patriarchal people are not interested. If we had war and raped women by soldiers, it's a tabuization. Nobody's talking in silence. Even historically, they didn't record it. It became normal. They enslaved women historically. It became normal. They killed women and take them from the family. It became normal. It's like something like everyone is a part of the war, as Rebecca you mentioned. So we are still living in a patriarchal world with the man is deciding which was a violation and not violation. We have a homicide and sexual abuse by families. Nobody's talking about girls. So still they try to make us silent. Yes, there is some rape of women, but this is not so much important. Yes, they kill children, but this is a war. They argue always the same way, and just to make us silent. And just I can give you from my experience by the Yazidis You know, we take 2015, 1,100 women who were in ES captivity to Germany, and one of them was Nadia Murad, the Nobel Peace Prize winner in 2019. I remember her in 2015 when I met her in a refugee camp. Small girl crying every day, have a kind of flashbacks, sleeping disorders, times many, which she was a couple of weeks in IS captivity, raped by 50, 60 people and more. But now came to Germany, and later she became the voice of their own people. She said, I will not be silent. I will arise my voice because I didn't do anything that's wrong. There's no need to be ashamed. Because there's a culture of shame also in the Middle East and Israel. We should not talk about them. And we have to break this kind of ideas and old manner of patriotic ideation. If we don't do that, this will continue. And maybe this is a time that, like you, which I respect you so much, I can hug you just for you so strong. And you are one of our people. We have to arise our voices through you. You are our hero. Not me and not another one. Yeah. From this woman we take to Germany, Nadia Murad is just one. We have another who founded a foundation, set up a foundation. They wrote books, they are international on the way. And they said, we will go everywhere to the world and we will talk about this kind that they do us. We don't lose our honor. They are honorless. The people who do this, the soldiers, the IS terrorists or the Hamas terrorists, if they had a little bit of honor, they would never do that because they don't have it. So there is no need to be ashamed, so we have to arise. This is maybe the general, what I can say to the topic. The second, we have to do with our colleagues in Israel more research, to make more evidence, to see what was happened on the first day, what has happened now 1 year after then, and documented this. Even the psychological disorders, somatizations, even as a lawyer, we have to document everything. We will need this. We know after the continuation, and one day they will have to. This is a long way to work, and there's no need to give up. We have to do this. I know from the Ukraine, the Russian soldiers, as I have some data, they raped about 300-400 women. But, you know, war is the same way also psychologically. And the Ukrainian government decided to not talk about that in that time. But they are documented everything. Even they have a special commission, a group who are doing this. But they said, if you now do something and make a rise about this, our soldiers will be demotivated. Our people will lose their motivation to fight because we have to fight to survive. We have no other choices. So sometimes it's time to do in the right time some things. And so this is, we have to continue work on a public, but also document it very well. And one day they will be persecuted, and the perpetrators have to find. There's no other way.
I think this is the only hope we have to have justice and not trivializing this kind of topic, the sexual violence. I would like to give all of you the chance to ask questions if you like, if you have any. Just show your hand, and then maybe also introduce yourself, who you are and maybe what you do. I think there's Anna will help you. We have some microphones. Okay, I can. Okay, here the woman with the dark hair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony and courage to come here and talk to us. Kol hakavod. And thank you to you all, and thank you for arranging this meeting, which is very hard to bear when we think about the things which happened. But I wonder, I mean, it's something different when soldiers in all wars violate the women of the enemies. It's always been like that. It's part of warfare, which I abhor, but it is. With Hamas, it's something different. They have a charta which says they have to kill every Jew. So why is the world not reacting to it? The UN took 5 months to acknowledge that the women were raped indeed. Such a surprise. It's incredible that the International Court, summoned by South Africa or Venezuela or whatever, accused Israel of genocide. It's something very different, and I think here is the point which we have to discuss and always take into consideration, because it can happen again tomorrow, after tomorrow.
Thank you for, I think it was rather a statement, but an important statement. But thank you for your contribution. So if anyone else has a question to one of the panelists, or if you want to respond to the statement, any of you. So, yeah.
Hi, I've got a question. Do you get any behind-the-scenes reactions from other women's organizations, from people you are usually working with, who usually are partners, allies, friends, and who you talk to, and they somehow explain to you why they don't speak up, or why they do speak up, or what happened to them when they speak up? Or is there no communication? Is it suddenly very silent?
One thing I've heard was that they ask for consensus. International organizations say, well, but we need consensus before we issue some sort of statement. So we need to get to a consensus about what statement we put out. And they justify it that way. That's what I've heard. So, yeah, Elle might have others.
Well, because I've been working in this field of emergency care and forensics and DNA. I've been working with a lot of international organizations in many countries. Some lines of communication went silent. I email, no response. But I can tell you, and you mentioned South Africa. I'm a South African myself. I have dual citizenship. So first of all, I apologize. My family fled South Africa because of the apartheid. My mother was involved with people that the regime, and she went to Israel in the early 70s. And I spent some time in my childhood in South Africa, and as a child I sat on benches that said white only. And the atmosphere now in South Africa is that we are the enemy and we are the evil. So I got 2 emails of support from South African organizations who worked with us, and they meant the world to me, because I just knew how difficult it was for these organizations to stand by us, to stand by the victims of this vicious attack. I sort of speak on their behalf because they were executed. I mean, even this hashtag, Believe Israeli Women, some of the people we need to believe are dead. Most of the people we need to believe are dead. And these 2 emails of support just meant the world to me. I knew how difficult it was for these people to send such messages to us. So if there's an optimistic ray of sunshine, is that people can absolutely rise above it and take a stand, and it's quite simple. Rape is not resistance. It is never okay, and there is no but.
Well, I got different reactions. Unfortunately, most of the women's organizations sort of went silent also in Germany, but I'm very happy to see Christa Stolle from Terre de Femme here. And we waited 4 weeks because we thought we are a small organization, surely there will be an outcry. And when there wasn't, we set up a small letter to the government saying we need to do something about the sexual violence that was perpetrated by Hamas, and also to save the hostages. So please stop the aid, stop everything until the hostages are free. And it was signed, for example, by Fatma Keza, who's also here. And the biggest support I received spontaneously was from women who fled Islamic countries because they recognized the violence and they panicked. So already in 2021, when there were attacks against Israel and we had demonstrations in our streets full of hatred, pro-Hamas demonstrations, not pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, they already panicked. And they panicked this time because they say, we know what's happening. We know it's directed against women in general. We know it's a sign that Islamism is getting stronger. And they were the strongest voices of support for the first months, and then they were viciously attacked by ideologues for a couple of months and went silent because they also didn't feel protected here. So if you speak up and you have a Moroccan background, you have an Algerian background, an Iranian background, you're viciously attacked when you speak out against Hamas. So that made them frustrated and also so afraid that some of them went silent. But at least 30 quite prominent women, some founder of the Green Party and so on, signed our letter to the government. So there was some sort of support, but unfortunately most of the bigger organizations didn't address the subject.
I was quite shocked by women's organizations trying to silence Muslim women that supported us, which is such a weird turn of events.
Yeah, one of the strongest voices I just saw is the head of the Muslim organization for women's rights in the US. And she clearly addressed the violence by Hamas and also draw the line of political violence, of honor killings. And she voiced it very, very clearly. And it was also shouted down, at least on social media.
Yes.
But those women who have the experience see that it is a tactic. And I think we need to work together and strengthen the voices because it's our biggest chance to call out the violence perpetrated by Hamas and also to clearly state cause and effect and who is the perpetrator and who is the victim.
Thank you. I think there's one final question from the audience. Could you please also introduce yourself?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so my name is Clara. Thank you very much for this insightful conversation. I have founded an organization that tries to tackle anti-Semitism at German universities.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a big issue here, but... So I was wondering, I think right after October 7th, we haven't been talking about what has happened to Israeli women, but within time passing and the IDF entering Gaza, it has become even worse, or even less people really speaking up about the issue and what has happened at Nova Festival, for example. That's what I'm witnessing within my group of friends and within my community, basically. So I was wondering, what would you tell young people or anyone, basically, that has a group of friends that maybe share my beliefs, but they wouldn't speak up about the issue? Also, not only, I mean, I think you also need to separate what is happening in Gaza and what has happened on October 7th. So I would like to hear your thoughts on how to really actually get people to speak up about the issue. Also, maybe within separating what is happening in Gaza, because I think it's two different issues from my perspective. Thank you.
I wish for the return of the hostages. I think we have more than 130 people there that were taken from their homes. Young people, elderly people, children, women, and I wish for the fastest conclusion of this conflict, not just for the next day or decade, but for years ahead. And as I confessed, I am a South African. And when my mother left, people thought it would never end. And I returned to South Africa and I've lived there when I was 25. And it was a completely different nation where people who were white and people who were black that never met socially when I was a child and never could have any kind of relations or marry each other, suddenly went out for drinks and clubbing. So when everything seems so pessimistic and like it would never end, I want to talk about hope. I refuse to think that the only option is either we kill all of them or they kill all of us, whether we are us or they are them. I think the future could be bright. I want to believe it. I saw it with my own eyes, so I think it can happen. We're sitting now in Germany. Doesn't that teach us something? I mean, my hosts have been so wonderful towards me, and I've had the time of my life here. I had so much fun. But 70 years ago, my grandmother jumped out of the train to Auschwitz, and this is why I'm here. Do you think my grandmother would believe that I would have drinks with German friends? So these are two conflicts that nobody believed that could be solved, and they were. And people marry each other, and people love each other, and people are friends, and they can look each other in the eye and see a human being. They're not dehumanizing each other. They see a person. And I wish for the day that we see a person on the other side and we don't regard it as the other side. And I think talks about who started it and who's right. And it's not that it's not important to stick to the facts, but I think the whole region needs to heal. It's going to take time, but I believe it. So that's what I'm going to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Scherer. I think this is a wonderful statement, almost to end our panel, but I think there's one final question in the audience. And
yes, thank you. My name is Clara. Thank you very much for the insights and, of course, for your testimony. I'm very moved. But my question is related to people like Greta Thunberg and so on. There are so many of this kind that are actually intelligent activists and spreading so much disinformation. And this is really important. I have also very much hope, and I'm still working on this spreading of this believing in democracy and women's rights, even at my age, so I don't get tired. But there must be something more that we could do on the internet and, countering this disinformation. What are your ideas?
Truth. Simple as that, but yeah.
An interesting fact is that Gigi Hadid, who is very much advocating against Israel, is a Palestinian refugee according to UNRWA. It sounds weird, but she is. Because they've been recognized as refugees in second and third generation, which doesn't happen to any other refugee in the world. So if there's an action that can be taken, it would be best to put UNRWA aside and put all of them under the UN Refugee Center. So put them all under the UN Refugee Commission and abolish this idea that you have to perpetrate a certain status through generations. If you've been a refugee, you're not born a refugee. If you've been a refugee, your children aren't, and neither are your grandchildren. And we need to state that, and we need to work towards that. And that will bring healing, because if somebody does not believe he's a refugee anymore, he's willing to accept something else.
I think that's a very wise statement you just made. A lot of good final words, but I was signaled that there's at least one more question in the audience. So anyone...
They're getting braver.
Yeah, like anyone, can you signal me, please, how many of you still have questions? 1, 2, 3. Last chance. Another one? No. Okay. So we have 3 more final questions, if that's okay with you, and then we will end here. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. I also want to say thanks a lot for all these statements, and very brave statements, very interesting. I would like to mention that I'm a board member of Latz Reloaded, Lesbisches Aktionszentrum Germany, and that we are also supporting very much Israel, and especially the women in Israel who have been going through these extreme times and this much suffering. I may mention that I got an invitation from Rebecca Schönenbach. Thanks a lot, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. There's another question here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's really, really important. My name is Avishag, and I just moved to Berlin from southern Israel, Ashkelon, which was one of the most bombarded cities in the last round. And me and around 30 people, we gathered and we created this project called Don't Let Hamas Rape Me Too. And it's very in-your-face kind of campaign. And we basically monitored since October 7th approximately 50 organizations, women's rights organizations, human rights, and children's rights organizations. And we just monitored their statements, their publications, their posts, their sharing on social media. We have around 200 documented research that we did on them, 200 pages for the first 2 months. So we even emailed them that they are appearing on the wall of shame on our website, hamasrapemetoo.com. And so they appearing on our website and in black and white. And the organization that did came out with a statement condemning completely the atrocities, the rape, the kidnapping, and so forth. So they're painted in pink. And when you click on it, you can actually see the statement. So we emailed them in demand to come out with an official statement on all of their social medias, not in a hidden place on their website, all of their social medias. Most of them obviously did not reply. Some of them did, trying to justify it, like ISHR and Oxfam International. They replied to us that they did talked about it in the Q&A section on their website. So they referred us to a Q&A, which the question was, why we don't talk about Israel. So the answer was that in Israel we have all the necessary facilities and organizations to handle what's happening there. So they don't really feel the need to do that. So it literally appears on their website on their Q&A. This is their condemnation statement. So I have actually 2 questions. One is for Rebecca and one is for Mickey. Before that, we also researched about gender studies faculties of leading universities. See their statements and their events that they organized after October 7th. And the majority of them really also did not reply to us. And they were so pro-Palestinians that they even created, there is the National Organizations for Gender Studies in America, that they issued an open letter that many leading universities are signed on, that to boycott any pro-Israel events that are organized by the students themselves. So this is something that we find very shocking. And for Rebecca, regarding to that issue, what do you think of future feminism will look like? Because I even found in one of the Instagram pages of the universities saying how do we interpret intifada? Why do we think intifada is violent? We're not Arab, we're not Muslims, we don't know the language, so we cannot interpret the word intifada as violent. It's violent to interpret intifada as violent. So what do you think the future will look like if this is what official gender faculties of universities, leading universities in America, really, this is their approach, this is one thing. And Miki, to you, is there any possible way to really, other than shaming them, legal-wise, if there is any international rate that we can take their rating down, I don't know, if there's any legal-wise actions that we can make to those organizations, against these organizations?
Thank you for your questions. Rebecca,
the feminist issue is good.
Legal methods. You need to prove wrongdoings. The only wrongdoing that we currently can prove is that UNRWA workers were involved in the October 7th attacks. You need to be able to prove that. As the UN helped us with that because they also sanctioned these workers, so we actually have a good case there. Who's going to pursue it, I'm not sure, but I'm sure people are thinking about it. With regards to other possibilities and aspects, people who've experienced the violence, like you're able to prosecute. However, where? Against whom? It's also a question, because currently Palestinians are not organized as a state form, so you can't go against the Palestinian state. Wait, I'm not. Yes, there are organizations. You can try and cut them financially. You can try and do a lot of things that people are doing. So there are a few legal actions that are taking place, and people who are organizing legal actions. However, you do need to have directly suffered from the attacks to do that. As we said, we have over 1,000 people dead. Their families could sue on their behalf. So there are avenues to do it. Which is the most successful? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Mrs. Schönbach.
Concerning the legal possibilities, I just add one thing. If you have pseudo-feminist organizations directly supporting terrorist organizations, report them to the police and make sure that they will not receive any funding anymore. It's a good way to shame them, but also make sure they don't receive funding. And concerning the academic field, which you described, I mean, we just saw this example of Judith Butler, who was one of the main icons of this kind of feminist movements, explaining that Hamas is a resistance movement. We really have to counter them in a very simple way, saying rape is not resistance. And every time you say but, you will make sure that women lose human rights everywhere in the world. Every time we say this but, and this is a very simple truth, we make sure we lose. And everybody who's saying but is not a feminist. And we have to call them out on that. And that is something very simple that we have to do. And the other thing, I think, we have to remember for ourselves to keep going, that we're not fighting against something for the sake of fighting. We are not against Islamism for the sake of fighting Islamism. We are not against, patriarchy for the sake of just fighting. We are fighting for something. We are fighting for the joy of life, for our freedom to dance on, to dance again. This is what we want to do. And this is why we fight. It's not about, confronting each other and going against some kind of people, but to have the freedom that we enjoy now and to keep up this freedom. And this is the only reason why Israel survived, because it always remembered why it's worth living. It's worth living to celebrate life. And when we keep that in mind, we will win, I think. So we will dance again.
So this is the final question, I promise.
I thank the organizers and all the speakers as the others, and I'm in a way activated again that what we could do within the next 3 weeks. So I'm one of the signers of the appeal which was done by Rebecca, and I'm a former member of the European Parliament. And 30 years ago, sorry to the young women, 30 years ago there was, before the women from Yazid and in Iraq suffered the horrible crime, there were the women from Bosnia who, in which since 1992 suffered the horrible war crimes and the first camps again in Europe after 45. And so I introduced into the European Parliament decisions which then went to the UN that rape of women is a war crime. That was not in the traditions of the UN till then. So I hope that that work, what we did within the European Parliament and which went to the UN and can be used in peace resolutions and peace agreements and project funding for peace groups, because what you are doing, I would say, in the line of Rebecca, fighting for women's rights for me is peace work. So don't let others say we are working for peace because we support Hamas and the Palestinians. I think everywhere where you stand for women's rights, girl rights, human rights in general, you stand for peace, and don't let that precious word to others. So I think within the next 3 weeks, we should try to be a sort of lobby, either as individuals or as a lobby, because I think in 2 days in New York, the CEDAW committee will start. That is one of the UN organizations where very influential women ministers are meeting and their experts. So our women minister, Lisa Paus, will fly to New York, and her assistants, and I think from the Ministry of Development Cooperation too. And you know, we have the saying now of feminist foreign policies, feminist development policies. So I think we should not be shy or think, anyway, the others are all against us. I think we should start to be a lobby with our different forces, and by supporting us and others supporting us. We should observe what is happening on this issue within the CEDAW meeting within the next 2 weeks. So let us not miss the next 2 weeks. I'm ready to help those who do not know how to relate to it. But I think we could write letters to the women ministers. And then the other field where we can be active is what Rebecca said, and the young women here or the other women with the internet. I think that we should not let those big companies owning so much money with the IT networks that earn their money by pictures of rape and sadism of Hamas. So they have to pay back. They earn money by these pictures. It's not only horrible and sadism and destroying of any feelings of empathy. They earn money with it, and they earn million monies by the videos of Hamas now going globally. So let us think of what we can do in that field. And then we have the programs of the Ministry of Women here in Germany. It is called Demokratieleben. And I think some of us should look into these programs. Millions of money are going into it, so that our and your work may be of cooperation, that we could do a cooperation with you. And we write together to the Women's Ministry, we want our cooperation be supported by German taxpayers' money. Yes? So that our voice is not lost and that we get stronger together.
Thank you very much. So I would like to thank the four of you for coming here, especially you two, having a long journey from Israel.
Thank you.
Same for you, of course. I think it is super important to talk about this topic, and I thank you for your patience to listen here. And I think the only chance to change this is if we keep on talking about things, and if we keep on trying to change things. And I hope we meet again, but maybe to talk about something else, because the world will be another one.
We always have the ICC.
Yeah, but we will. Thank you. I think I give the final words to Anna, and then I hope to meet all of you for some chatting and interesting talk afterwards. Thank you. And thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to say a couple of thank yous at the end of this very insightful panel. First of all, thank you very, very much for coming here and for sharing your insights with us. A special thanks also to Chen, who came from Israel, for being here with us today. Yeah. Thank you also, Rixa, for leading us through this night and being so patient and empathetic with everyone. Thank you very, very much for that. And a great thanks to Bayer for your support and for hosting this event and for letting us be here. And also, I don't know if you realized, you also put out the Israel flag outside. I'm very grateful for this important statement today. Of course, a huge thank you to our partners and dear friends from the American Jewish Committee, from Frauen für Freiheit, and for the Axel Springer Freedom Foundation for this great cooperation, your support, and for making this night possible. And thank you, personal thanks to my dear colleagues from WerteInitiative. First of all, the board, Elio Adler and Daniel Kohn and Lydia Begida, who's not here today. And a special thank you, of course, to Christoph, Ronja, Benjamin, and Clara, who were helping so much to organize this night. We as WerteInitiative are funded by the Federal Ministry of Interior, and especially tonight we're also very grateful for that. I would like to invite you to join 2 campaigns. Already there were given examples of how every one of us can be active and become active, and I want to suggest 2 more things to you. The first idea is a campaign that the American Jewish Committee invented. It's called Believe Israeli Women. We have signs here outside. We have signs that you can hold, take a picture with it, and post it on social media. We want to invite you to do that because, as we heard today, it's so important to speak about it, to speak up, and to speak publicly about what Hamas did to all these women. So that's why we want to invite you outside to take a picture with this sign and to say, Believe Israeli Women. And the second campaign is from the Israeli embassy. Tomorrow is the 8th of March, the Women's Day, the International Women's Day, and the Israeli embassy said that this day should be used to remember the hostage women, the women who are still held hostage in Gaza. And the Israeli embassy is inviting everyone to change their profile picture to one of the pictures of the women held in captivity in Gaza. You can find this campaign on the pages from either the ambassador or from the Israeli embassy. Feel free to do that. We would love for you to join that campaign too. Thank you for being here tonight with us. Stay in touch. If you want to learn more about the WerteInitiative, you can follow us on social media. We have a QR code over there. You can subscribe to our newsletter and check out our website. Thank you so much for coming again.